All of these formulas are formulas that you need to make sure that you recognize. Circumference, diameter times pi. Area of a circle is pi times the radius squared, where the very first thing you do is square the radius and then multiply by pi. For the test, you're going to use 3.14 for pi. You're not going to have to worry about using the pi button. You're just going to use 3.14, and then you're going to round to the nearest tenth. The area of a rectangle, of a parallelogram, of a rhombus is base times height. The area of a square is also base times height, but because the sides are equal in length, you could just say it's the side times the side. The area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2, which is the same thing as if you see here, it says 1/2 base times height. So base times height divided by 2 is the same thing as 1/2 base times height. The area of a triangle, of a trapezoid is base 1 plus base 2 times the height divided by 2, or 1/2 of the sum of the bases times the height, where you need to make sure you're adding the bases first and then either taking half of that quantity or multiplying it by the height and taking half. Remember that, once more, because it's taking a half of something, you can actually write it as base 1 plus base 2 divided by 2 times the height, if that's what you prefer to write it as, or multiplied by the height and then divided by 2. Either way, you're dividing by 2 after you add the bases and multiply them with the height. Please remember, this is a very important point that a lot of people are forgetting. Height is the distance from the highest point of the shape to the base. It makes a right angle with the base. So if I had a parallelogram or a trapezoid, better yet, and I showed you this here dotted line, that's the height. You could also show it like on the outside because it creates a 90-degree angle. That's the height. And then the last thing that we have to make sure we remember is the fact that composite shapes are composed of other shapes. They're made up of a whole bunch of other shapes. And so because of that, when you are calculating the area of a composite shape, you need to figure out what shapes you're going to break them up into. And sometimes, because you don't have all the measurements, you may need to reevaluate what you're going to choose as the pictures. Make sure you remember that area is always square units because it uses 2 dimensions, length and width or base and height. Don't forget this, because if you actually tell me that the area of something is single units like centimeters or inches, you are going to sound just as silly and it's going to be just as incorrect as if we had a toddler come in here and we asked that toddler, "How old are you?" and they said 2 gallons. Using the wrong units makes it sound silly and it doesn't make sense. And so even though for you guys it may be still a little bit of a weird thing to realize that inches and inches squared are kind of different, kind of like feet and gallons are different, inches and inches squared are different. If it's area that I'm asking you for, you use square units. If it's perimeter, you use single units. Just like if we ask the age of a toddler, we would expect that they answer in years, not in gallons. So please remember that, because that will get points off, because you will be answering it incorrectly. Every single practice problem on this study guide was created from the original test. It has different units, it has different measurements, but number 1 on the study guide is like number 1 on the test, and so on. And those of you that have always performed really well on tests because you've been prepared by doing all your study guides, you've known exactly that this is always the case. So let's look at this one. Number 1, reading the instructions, says use 3.14 as the estimate of pi, so that means we're not using the pi symbol on the calculator, and they want you to round to the nearest 10th. If you're asked to round to the 10th and you don't, you're going to get points taken off, so please make sure you do that. Circumference is diameter times pi. This is, so because of the fact that you guys are using a calculator, I want to make sure that you show me that you, A, know what the formula is for each of the things they're asking you, and B, you did the right math. So if you only wrote answers on those blanks, you would not get the full credit.
Oh, is that why?
Okay? Please don't be lazy. There's only 8 questions. Make sure that when you're doing this, you write down circumference. You see where it says circumference right on the blank? Next to it, you can write, or above it, or somewhere in the vicinity, you can write C equals diameter times pi, so that I know that you know which formula to use. Then, because of the fact that the radius is 4 and I'm using diameter, I know the diameter has to be what? 8. So you would then say, okay, that means that the circumference is 8 times, and then pi is 3.14. So far, this is the work I expect to see. When you do it and you multiply it out, you get 25.12. Now, the question says round to the nearest 10th. When you're rounding to the nearest 10th, the number in the tenths place is the 1. You look at the 2, which is just to the right. If 2 was 5 or more, the 1 would go up by 1. Since it's less than 5, it remains as 1. So the circumference is 25.1, and you must use units. And for circumference, it's single units, so it's just inches. What is the area of a circle's formula?
Pi r squared.
Pi times pi r squared.
Pi r squared. What is the r?
Radius.
The radius is 4. Remember that order of operations says you have to do exponents before you multiply. So what you're going to do is you're going to write down 4 squared and then times pi. 4 squared is 16, and when you put your 16 times 3.14 in your calculator, you get 50.24. You're looking at the 2 because you're rounding. 4 tells you to stay. So it's 50.2, and what are my units?
Inches squared.
Inches squared because it's area. Next question, diameter. Look at number 2. Number 2 is telling me that the diameter is 7, correct? If the diameter of a circle is 7 centimeters, the diameter is the distance from one point to the next going through the center. So it's the longest line of the circle. If it helps you to draw pictures, do so. When you see the word diameter and you see a number that's small, like 7, don't immediately think that that's the radius and you're going to double it. The diameter is 7 centimeters. That means that the radius is how much? 3.5. So now that you know the diameter and the radius, you know that circumference is diameter times pi, of which the diameter is 7, pi is 3.14. And when you do the multiplication, you get?
It's like 21 point something.
21.98. Now, this is a tricky one because they want you to round to the nearest 10th. Well, the 10th place is a 9. And not only is the 10th place a 9, but 8, who's the guy that tells me what to do, is bigger than 5. So that means the 9 would theoretically go up to 10. And if that happens, that means that that number of 1 becomes 2. So the circumference rounded is 22, and the units are centimeters. Then we go ahead and do the area, and we know that area is pi times the radius squared. Well, who's the radius? 3.5. So I know that I'm going to do 3.14 multiplied, and this is the part that people make a mistake on. 3.5 squared. An order of operations says you must do exponents before multiplying. So you must do 3.5 times 3.5 and then multiply it by 3.14. And what do we get?
6.
So 3.5 squared is 12.25, and that multiplied by 3.14 is
I deleted it. No.
465.
38.465.
465.
We're looking at the 4 to round because that's the tenths place. So then that would be 38.5, and I must remember exactly that the units are squared. Now we get into a word problem, which is really just as easy as the other ones if you're paying attention. So this is actually a true statement. If ever you, in your new car, decided to get a steering wheel cover, maybe the puffy stuff or the leather or whatever, you would need, the fuzzy one, you would need to find out the circumference of that steering wheel. Because the steering wheel itself is actually going to need, you're going to need to find the, basically, if that's your steering wheel, you're going to need to find the distance around. Obviously, that's what circumference is. It's telling me that a common diameter is 14 inches. That's most steering wheels. That means that I know that the distance from one end to the other is 14 inches. They're asking for the circumference, and I know that the formula for the circumference is pi d, or diameter times pi. And I know that the diameter is 14 because that's what they said. I know the diameter is 14. And so I put in 14 for diameter, and I multiply it by 3.14, and I get 43.96. They want to round to the nearest tenth. Here's my tenths place. 6 is bigger than 5. It tells my 9 to go up to 10, which means the 43 actually becomes 44. So this is 44, and what kind of units is it? Inches. So basically what this is saying is that if you wanted to make your own steering wheel cover and you knew there was some really cool fabric that you wanted to wrap around, you would need 44 inches long of fabric to be able to wrap around the whole thing. And remember, now we get into the area of composite shapes. So you are definitely going to need to know the area of trapezoids. You are going to need to know the area of a half a circle, a triangle, parallelograms, and any combination of those. In other words, composite shapes are shapes that are made up of all different kinds of shapes possibly. Let's look at the first one. They're asking me for the area of this composite shape. What are the different shapes that are making this up? A trapezoid, and in addition to the trapezoid, I also have a triangle. So in order to get the area of the whole shape, I am going to get the area of the trapezoid, then I'm going to get the area of the triangle, and then I'm going to add them together. Let's start with the trapezoid. A trapezoid is figured out or calculated, the area of a trapezoid is calculated by multiplying the sum of the bases to the height and then divided by 2. So the formula is, the official formula is 1/2 base 1 plus base 2 times the height. That's the mathematical formula, but the common sense formula that you could think to yourself is add the 2 bases, then divide by 2 and multiply by the height. You could do that. Or you can multiply by the height and then divide by 2. Well, looking at my trapezoid, what are the measures of the two bases? I know that the first base up top is 3 inches and the second base is 7 inches. I also know that the height is 6 inches. If I plug these into my formula, I am going to get 3 plus 7, because that's base 1 plus base 2, divided by 2, and then multiplied by the height of 6. Well, 3 plus 7 is 10, and 10 divided by 2 is 5, and 5 times 6 is 30. So I know that the area of the trapezoid is 30 square inches. But they're not asking me just for the area of the trapezoid. They're asking me for the area of the composite shape. So what I need to do then is figure out the area of the triangle. Looking at the triangle, so if I look at the triangle, I notice that the area of a triangle, I remember the formula to the area of a triangle is base times height divided by 2. So that means I'm going to take my triangle. If I flip it, so everybody look the way this is, it's like this. I know that the base happens to be the same as the 7. So when I take my triangle, if I decided to rotate it, that would tell me that the base is 7 inches and the height, as you can see here, is 4 inches. Well, the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height, or if you want to think of it as base times height and then divided by 2. The base is 7, the height is 4. 7 times 4 divided by 2 is the same thing as 28 divided by 2, which is 14 square inches. So the area of the triangle is going to be 14 square inches. And that means that the area of the whole figure is going to be the sum of these two, which is 30 plus 14, and that's 44 square inches. Here we go. Next guy. Because of the fact that this distance is 10, and that's called the diameter, it means that the radius, which is half of that, is going to be 5. So remember that you're trying to get the area of the half a circle and the area of the triangle. The half a circle's area is the circle's area is pi r squared, but because it's half, you divide it by 2. And so that's exactly right. You're going to do 5 squared times 3.14 and then divide it by 2. So that's 25, because that's what 5 squared is, multiplied by 3.14 and then divided by 2. 25 times 3.14 is 78.5. And then you divide by 2 and you get
39.25.
Thank you, Anthony.
39.25. So the area of the it's half a circle. We're not done with this. We just want to know the area of this guy. So 39.25 square feet. Now we have to get the area of the triangle. So I noticed that the base of the triangle is 10 and the height is 8. And when I'm calculating the area of a triangle, I do base times height divided by 2. The base is 10, the height is 8. 10 times 8 is 80. 80 divided by 2 is 40. So the area of the triangle is 40 square inches, or square feet, sorry. So that means that the area of both together is going to be 39.25 plus 40, which is 79.25. Don't forget your units, square feet, because it's area. And because I'm rounding to the nearest tenth, I am going to look at the 2 and round it by looking at the 5, which tells me that 2 becomes 3. So it's really 79.3 square feet. The next question asks you to find the area of only the blue. The question on the test may not have a parallelogram on the inside. It might be a different shape. But the gist of the story is that if it's asking you to find the area of something minus something, like except for something, you just get the area of the whole thing and then subtract the area of the part you don't want.
8 feet equals 80.
Okay, so first we're going to get the area of the entire rectangle. So the area of the whole thing is going to be 10 by 8. That's exactly right. And 10 by 8 is 80 square feet. But remember that we don't want the area of the whole entire rectangle. We want the rectangle that's all of this minus, exactly.
By 8 times 6, which is 48.
Find the area of the parallelogram, and remember that the area of a parallelogram is base times height as well, just like a rectangle. And 8 times 6, you're right, is 48 square feet.
Be subtracted by 48 square feet, which is 32 square feet.
So 32 square feet, or you could write it as 32 SQ, abbreviations for square, feet. That is the area of the blue. So if you read this question, it says, in the above figure, the blue part is a floor plan of a store owner's carpeted area. How much money will the store owner pays if Home Depot charges $15 per square foot?
It's a lot of dollars.
Well, I figured out how many square feet. How do I figure out how much money they're going to pay?
You multiply it by 50. You multiply it because you're 32 square feet in total, and then per each one is $15.
Exactly. Because of the fact that you have 32 square feet in total, and that's actually a very small, tiny little space. 32 square feet.
It's not like one of these.
It's
One of those is a square foot.
It's smaller than this. And then you're going to pay $15 per square foot, and that's the reason why we multiply. And when you do 32 times 15, okay, so 2 times 5 is 10, carry the 1, 5 and 3 is 15, and 1 is 16, add a 0, 2 and 3, and you get 480. And now I have to use what units? What are they asking me for here? So I have to use the dollar symbol. So it's 32 square feet of carpet, and it's going to cost me $480 total. If you feel comfortable with every question that we have done on the study guide, you are going to ace the test. You're done learning this information.